Celebrating 46 years on the air, award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, the White House claiming progress against inflation, but not everyone's so sure. Plus, while the American West endures continuing drought, the UK worries about running out of reserves. A water war brewing between two parched U.S. states. One may invoke an old deal to siphon water from the other. And in our feature, we look back to our very first show in 1977. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. As always, great to have you with us here again on Farm Week. The president claiming progress in the fight against inflation, but despite a bit of cooling, the numbers still under scrutiny by federal officials. Everywhere from Pennsylvania Avenue to the reserve banks across the country. John Torpy has more.
I just want to say a number, 0. Today, we received news that our economy had 0% inflation in the month of July. 0%. Here's what that means. While the price of some things went up last month, the price of other things went down by the same amount. The result, 0 inflation last month. Headwinds in the months ahead.
This week, President Biden shared economic news filled with optimism in the ongoing nationwide fight against high inflation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released what some analysts have called surprising data for last month's Consumer Price Index, where the CPI remained unchanged for the month of July. With an annual inflation rate now at 8.5%, Biden was upbeat about the nation's economy.
When you couple that with last week's booming jobs report of 528,000 jobs created last month and 3.5% unemployment, it underscores the kind of economy we've been building.
One economist watching inflation rates closely is Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago President Charles Evans. Evans was in Des Moines, Iowa, sharing his insights on recent economic findings.
So it's natural to ask the question when you see growth stall or be negative, or is this the beginning of a recession? And I think the answer to that is no. We are tightening monetary policy at the moment. And, we're at about 2.5% on the short-term policy rate. That's a neutral level, and that's because we've got very high inflation.
Evans noted statistics in the latest CPI report help support his cautious optimism for what the economy might have in store for the remainder of 2022.
It is an unusual economy, and inflation is high for unusual reasons. Supply chains have been difficult. They've caused higher prices, relative prices have gone up, and labor force has been slow to come back. But saying that, businesses are hiring. Vacancies are continuing to be up, and people who are looking for a job can find them, even in the environment with rising rates. And so I'm optimistic the economy will continue to grow well in the second half, so that we'll definitely have positive growth this year, and that we'll continue that into next year while inflation is coming down.
The American West, certainly not the only area suffering from a continuing drought. Across Europe, a lack of rain causing crops to be lost. Our friends across the pond worried about reserves being exhausted. Josh Bittner has that story.
As years-long arid conditions grip the western U.S., producers in Europe are enduring their continent's worst drought in decades.
We're really worried, especially for 8 months' time when the sheep are in for lambing. If we're feeding our winter rations now, we run the risk of running out, and across the country people will be doing the same. So in the spring, it's going to push the demand up and it'll push the price up.
England has been thumped by months of low rainfall and a record heat wave. France has declared their worst drought on record as crops from soybeans to lavender have suffered. Irrigation bans, drinking water shortages, and temporary power cuts to river-cooled nuclear power plants have followed. 90% of the Bosnian corn crop has been damaged, reportedly, due to severe drought in the Balkans, exacerbating cattle feed concerns. Tinder-dry vegetation has given way to wildfires in France, Spain, and Portugal, where over 600 firefighters have been mobilized. Officials in Germany say Rhine River water levels could reach a critical low any day, making transportation of coal and gasoline increasingly difficult.
Our analysis indeed is pointing to extremely low flow affecting almost all the European rivers.
At least 30% of northern Italy's rice crop has already been lost as the salty Adriatic Sea has creeped nearly 20 miles into the dwindling Po River, a crucial irrigation source.
So that's salt up there.
The plight is echoed domestically in the California Delta, where decreased snowpack has given way to increased salinity from the Pacific Ocean, leading to a bump in crooked produce unattractive to retail outlets.
We just try to hang on and hope the water quality gets better. But I mean, basically, we're paying our bills with 75%, if we're lucky, of our income.
A new era of water wars as the West faces an unprecedented drought due to climate change, a war brewing between Colorado and Nebraska over access to the South Platte River. CNN's Stephanie Elam reports how one state is evoking a century-old deal to get more water from the other.
Just make it known that water is life here.
Sue Carter is among those in Julesburg, Colorado, who fear their lifeline is caught in a tug of war.
We go through droughts every 20 years or so, but nothing of this magnitude.
Not only has Tom Check had a front row seat to a punishing drought, but also to a brewing battle between states.
We are in for a wave of water rights battles throughout the West. It's going to be between urban and ag areas. It's going to be between states.
Case in point, Colorado and Nebraska and the South Platte River, which flows from the Rocky Mountains into Nebraska. In January, Nebraska dusted off a 99-year-old compact between the two states, announcing a plan to build canals on Colorado land to siphon water off the South Platte into a Nebraska reservoir system during the non-irrigation months in the fall and winter.
Without this compact and our ability to enforce our rights, we would see dramatic impact upon our state.
Why now? Nebraska points to Colorado's ever-growing population and its estimate of nearly $10 billion for 282 new projects along the South Platte.
Should all the long-term goals be affected, they would reduce the amount of water flows coming to the state of Nebraska by 90%.
The fact is, many of those projects are not necessarily going to come to fruition.
Colorado state leaders have raised an eyebrow at Nebraska's plans. In a statement to CNN, Colorado Governor Jared Polis calls it a political stunt, saying outgoing Governor Ricketts is wasting taxpayer dollars. Is Nebraska getting its fair share of water?
In the 99-year history of the compact, we have complied with those provisions of the compact.
I'm walking in the original canal Nebraska started to build in the 1890s, but never finished. Now, more than a century later, if they were to come back to this area, they'd have to navigate things like Interstate 76, as well as take over private lands. How do you feel about them potentially coming to grab this land?
Well, obviously nobody wants to lose any of their property.
This land belongs to Jay Goddard, a fifth-generation rancher in this corner of Colorado, who could see part of his land in Julesburg taken by Nebraska under eminent domain. But more important, he says, is what the canal might do to the overall health of the river.
We have a lot of good wildlife, whether geese, turkey, deer. I'm worried that it'll dry up the river at the wrong time.
Not only could that hurt Julesburg's hunting economy, but also its neighbors. In Nebraska,
here, the difference between a good farmer and a bad farmer is a timely rain.
Farmer Darrell Armstrong wants assurances that the river won't be allowed to run dry.
The South Platte basically is the lifeblood to our surface aquifer.
Yet he says he's seeing less and less water coming down the river. So for him, it is less about Colorado versus Nebraska and more about urban growth versus agriculture.
And a lot of the agreements that have been made that we're coming up short.
It's just the beginning of a new era of water wars in an age of unprecedented climate change, as rivers dry up and desperation flows.
Human nature is our biggest barrier, I believe, in trying to manage water in the West.
Stephanie Elam, CNN, at the Colorado-Nebraska border.
So, would you like to see a cultured and refined garden in the English tradition without having to fly across the pond? In Southern Gardening this week, Gary Bachman visits Vicksburg, Mississippi. There, believe it or not, he found a landscape reminiscent of those in the English countryside. Here's Gary.
Today, Southern Gardening is in Vicksburg visiting the beautiful gardens of our friends Donna and Richie. Let's take a stroll along the path on the side of their home to look at their English garden. The first thing we come to is the 2019 Mississippi Medallion winner, Blew My Mind evolvulus. This plant produces scores of vibrant blue flowers that last a single day. Looking down the path, we're invited in by this beautiful metal arch that frames the view of the peaceful garden inside. Clematis vine scrambles up, over, and around the structure to provide some fascinating plant interest. Entering the side garden, we're greeted by creative mass combination plantings of bright, colorful annuals and perennials. Of course, the larger plants like the pink knockout roses make an instant visual impact. But I really like the small plants tucked in the corners like this orange portulaca. Just down the path, we find the fantasy caladium with its snowy white leaves, deep red magenta veining, and emerald green edging. Next to it is the low-growing lamb's ear, which is a nice companion to the caladium. Across the path, the low-growing orange profusion zinnia grabs your attention. This is contrasted by the tall blooms of the orange ditch lily that gently sway in the breeze. And in the center of it all is the multi-tiered fountain, with its relaxing sound of falling water. The mixture of colors and textures makes this side garden a peaceful and attractive getaway from the hustle and bustle of life. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman, and I hope you'll join me next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up on our Farm Week feature as we go deeper into our 46th season, a treat. We'll venture back in time to a story that aired in the premiere of Farm Week all the way back in October of 1977. You may have seen this one, all about Miss Lillian Thornton, who raised livestock near Raymond, Mississippi, all by herself after her husband passed away. A story told in her own words. That's coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith, and their right to make their own plans and arrive at their own decisions, and their ability and power to enlarge their lives and plan for the happiness of those they love. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. That these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the market report. Looks like prices back on an upswing last week, likely due to the WASDE and other global factors.
That's right, Mike. You know, the WASDE gives us an opportunity to get an idea of how things look from a technical perspective. It is, after all, influenced by action on the ground, plus weather. But we'll get into all of that. But first, the numbers. Going back up, as we said, then the WASDE report. What did it actually say? And finally, our row report, where we dissect the current issues affecting the markets. Markets on the upswing last week. All commodities we follow up. Row crops, livestock, everything. Let's take a look. Last week's biggest gain, lumber up $109.50. Row crops no slouch either. Soybeans up 45.5 cents. Corn also up 32.25 cents as well. Not to mention, wheat also up 30.25 cents. The reason? We'll get into it. One reason for the rebound, this month's WASDE report. Based on what we've seen, looks like supplies and production not as strong as we thought. Doesn't mean we're at a shortage yet, but it certainly gives the markets something to think about. Here's what it said.
U.S. wheat supplies raised 2 million bushels from last month. Yield raised 0.2 bushels an acre. Food use raised 6 million bushels. Exports increased 25 million, while ending stocks down 29 million. Season average farm price, $9.25 per bushel. Global wheat supplies up 4.3 million tons. Production up primarily from Russia, Australia, and China. World consumption up 4.4 million tons, and global trade increased 3.2 million tons. U.S. corn production, 14.4 billion bushels down, and yield forecast down 1.6 bushels per acre. Feed and residual use down 25 million bushels due to smaller crop. Exports also lowered 25 million bushels. Season average farm price, $6.65 per bushel. Global corn production down, EU corn suffering heat and dryness, lessening projected crop. Ukraine corn production projected higher. U.S. rice supplies up due to higher production, 1.7 million hundredweight. Projected ending stocks raised, 36.5 million hundredweight. Season average farm price, a record $18.80 per hundredweight. Global rice supplies lowered 4.1 million tons due to lower production for Bangladesh and India. World use up 518.7 million tons. Ending stocks lowered 4.3 million tons. U.S. soybean production up 26 million bushels despite lower harvested area, which is down 0.3 million acres. Supplies projected 36 million bushels higher. Ending stocks also up 15 million. Season average farm price $14.35 per bushel. Global soybean production up mainly from China. Crush also raised due to Brazil. Global soybean stocks raised. U.S. red meat and poultry production slightly higher. Beef production raised, pork production lowered. Broiler production raised while turkey production lowered. Egg production raised as well. U.S. milk production forecasts raised due to higher inventory and output. All milk price forecast is $25.20 per hundredweight. U.S. cotton beginning stocks up, exports down 2 million bales. Ending stocks 600,000 bales lower. Season average farm price 97 cents per pound. Global cotton production 3.1 million bales lower. Consumption 800,000 bales lower. World trade 1.8 million bales lower.
So now that we have the context, what was the true impact? Well, not as much as you'd think. Market analyst Naomi Bloom says many of these things were expected and that prices may have seen their peak for now.
A lot of the things were expected. A few little pop-ups of, oh, that's a little bit surprising, were there, but ultimately no big dramatic changes. So they lowered the planted acres for corn, soybeans, and wheat. And I think for soybeans, we were looking for that increase to happen. So that was a little bit of a surprise. And on corn, they did lower yield, as people were thinking, pretty much in line with pre-report expectations. So not a big surprise there. And for soybeans, the bigger surprise was that they actually increased the yield just a little bit. So going forward, we're in a situation where in the bigger picture, yeah, the ending stocks for corn are a little bit tighter than they were last month. And the ending stocks for soybeans are now a little bit bigger than they were last month. And the wheat ending stocks now are a little bit lower than they were last month. So it's enough of a dramatic non-event that the market is going to keep, I think, marching sideways, similar to what it did last year. So going forward, we'll keep watching weather, but this report today did not give us enough new, fresh, bullish news to justify any price breakout higher. And at the same time, if we see prices kind of set back a little bit lower, they should be well supported as we go into fall. Let me just be blunt. If people are waiting for $7 or $8 corn or dramatically higher prices, we're in a point right now of reset or pause. And all of those stars that aligned so perfectly last year to give us $8 corn, they're behind us. So now going forward, we're at the pause here, and markets probably trade sideways until we can get to know some more information. You need confirmation that this corn crop is below 170 bushels. You would need confirmation that the soybean crop would be lower than probably 45 bushels. And you're going to need to see demand pick up you have to have early frost and then compromised by all of a sudden wet late harvest. So I guess what I'm trying to say, for the stars to align from here to get those higher prices, it's probably not going to happen in the short term.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Let's keep in mind that prices are always looking for a balance that'll never come. There's always something to make them move. Mike?
Thank you, Zach. Recently, we began our 46th season on the air, a tradition that goes all the way back to October 3rd, 1977. That Monday night so long ago, we ran our very first feature story all about a widow in central Mississippi who raised cattle on her own and shared her ideas about life.
I grew up on a farm with 12 of us, 9 boys and 3 girls. And I must have learned a great deal about some forms of farming, especially cotton farming at that time. And so it hasn't seemed too hard for me. My lawyer said when my husband died nearly 11 years ago for me to make no changes. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I mean for you to make no changes. I said, what I'm going to do with all those black Angus cows that my husband has bought that we have. He said, you're going to keep them. You know as much about it as he did. And I did. So I did keep them, and that, I think, has really meant almost the salvation of my life and my mind, because I was so busy I didn't have time to maybe grieve like I would have. I'm 81. I guess you might say I've been farming about nearly 11 years since my husband died. If I'm going to farm, I have no one to help. Therefore, I have to do whatever comes to be done. It matters not what it is. I have to find a way if I don't know how. I build my own gates. I hang them. I have a circular saw that I saw all the parts, measure all parts for a gate. Saw them all here at the house where I have electricity. Carry them to the place that I'm going to hang it. Build the gate and then hang it by way of lifts, maybe tubs, or concrete blocks or whatever, till I have nailed the hinges on and hang it. My husband had all of the fencing done before he died, but there's always breaks of one kind and another, and I repair. I have a stretcher, and usually I don't have to use a stretcher. I use 2 hammers most times to repair. I have black Angus cattle, purebred, registered. I usually keep 100 head of cattle, but I've recently sold 67 head because they haven't been worth too much. And all of the years until last year, I've had to pay income tax on what I've made on my cattle because I'd sell some of them for breeding purposes and others to buyers whom I know. And so I have done that. But I felt that maybe I better just kind of cut down. I have only 36 now, and I'm just keeping those to kind of see whether the price goes up or whether they don't. And I raise my hay. I have 16 acres that I have cut every year for hay, and I usually get from 1,500 to 2,000 bales of hay, and that's enough for my cattle that I keep. I have a large barn that my husband made troughs all the way through, and they're big enough to hold just one bale of hay after another. I have the hay stacked back of the troughs, and I just lift those 65 and 70-pound bales over into that trough one by one until I have enough to feed as many cows as I have. I raise a garden. I would guess it's at least 1/5 of an acre, and sometimes when I'm working it, I'm sure it's a 1/2 acre. I've had to water it consistently. Luckily, I have a lake up over where my garden is. And that pipe, I stop up one end at the garden with a stick with a rag wrapped around it. Then I go up to the levee and I fill the pipe, the lead pipe, with water. Usually takes about 6 or 8 gallons to fill it. And then I stick a stick with a rag on it in that and keep it very tight until I wade down into the lake and put that under water with a rock on it and then pull out the stick with the rag in it. Then I go back to the garden and pull the stick out there, and I have a great big inch of water coming out, and then I take pipes and put to the lead pipe, just shave them off and stick them in and water the whole garden. Whatever you have to do, you have to do if you have a farm. If you don't know how to do it, you have to learn.
Definitely a trip back in time. Miss Thornton lived another 12 years after that story aired. She passed away at age 93 in 1989. Well, next time on Farm Week, something rare these days, a positive story about the American supply chain.
2 years ago, they thought hiccups in shipping tied to the pandemic would be short-lived. But a year later, they got worried. 2 years later, they're almost panicky. But with a little ingenuity, they found a solution. They were willing to try something new. It turned out to be a recipe for success.
The perfect relief valve, next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. See you next week. Thanks for watching.